in Microsoft Fabric. Now, this session is being recorded and will be made available on the Data Platform Downunder YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, you still can. Martin or I will put that link into the chat window. Sign up. You're able to then go back and watch all of the sessions that we have hosted since we've been running Data Platform Downunder. Now, throughout the session, feel free to put your questions into chat. Martin and I will be monitoring those, and we'll be able to put them through to Pam appropriately so that we can get your answers or your questions answered. So with that, I'll hand over to Pam and we'll get the session going.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop since we will hopefully be doing a demo a little later. All right. And let me just bring up my other window. There you go. Okay. And yes, as I'm presenting today, please do feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to take them in line. So I'll also keep an eye on the chat, but I don't mind if you come off microphone and just ask your question. There's not a whole lot of us, so it can be a super informal session. So do feel free to ask me questions, you know, take me off on a tangent. I'm totally happy to do any of that. So as Warwick said, my name is Pam Lahoud, and I am a program manager on the relatively newly formed databases in Fabric Customer Advisory Team, or CAT team. We started the team last summer, and I started on the team in September when I came back from my summer break. So we've just been primarily focused on SQL and Fabric, obviously, because that's the only database in Fabric right now. And we introduced that for public preview back at Ignite last year. And so it's been several months of just kind of being immersed in SQL and Fabric and working with customers who are, doing POCs, and we even have some production customers on SQL and Fabric. So this session today, I wanted to make like a kind of an end-to-end overview session for what you need to know about SQL database and Fabric. Okay, so come on, PowerPoint. Ooh, whoop, wait. All right, so what are the 5 W's? Who, what, when, where, why? But we're going to do them in a slightly different order. We're going to do them in what, where, why, who, when for SQL database and Fabric. So let's start with the what. So as you know, or I hope you know, I hope everyone's heard of Microsoft Fabric at this point. It's kind of a big deal for us at Microsoft and in Azure Data. And so when Fabric was first introduced, this really grew out of Power BI, right? So Power BI, very successful data visualization platform, but it's very user-friendly. It's what we call SaaS, software as a service, right? And so the Fabric ecosystem has grown out of this SaaS world of really making things simple and easy. So we started, of course, with Power BI, and then we brought in all the other things that you need to do for data analytics. So when Fabric was first introduced to the world, we called it a unified analytics platform, data analytics platform. But last year, when we introduced the concept of operational databases in Fabric, we leveled Fabric up to a unified data platform. So now it's a full data platform. Every kind of data you have and every kind of use for that data, we hope can be satisfied by Fabric. And the idea behind Fabric is just like you have a OneDrive for all your documents with Office, with Microsoft Office, in Fabric, you have a OneLake for all of your data. So the idea of Fabric is everything is integrated, everything is simple and easy to use, and the work you have to do to get all of your data to work together should be minimal. So when you build databases outside of Fabric, you have either on-prem SQL Server or Azure SQL Database. That's just a database in and of itself. If you want to do other things with that data, you need to stitch a whole bunch of solutions together. And in Azure, that can be super complicated. So the idea of Fabric is to make all of this easy for you, to make it just a few clicks to get real true value from your data, and to be able to really unlock any sort of uses of your data, be it visualization or analytics or machine learning, and of course the buzzword today, AI. And so you're going to find everything simplified, even connectivity to things like AI Foundry, and being able to do agentic applications, even build agentic applications on Fabric. So that's the idea behind Fabric, your unified data platform for the era of AI. That's the marketing spiel there. All right, so we want to talk specifically about SQL and Fabric. So, we've got many, many, many different flavors of SQL Server or SQL. And of course, I will admit that coming from the SQL world, I was a little bit skeptical when I found out we were going to put SQL in Fabric, because I was like, why would we do that? We already have all these different flavors of SQL. Why would we put it into Fabric? And remember, the idea of Fabric is that it's easy, it's simple, it's SaaS, it's out of the box, things just work. And that's the idea of having SQL in Fabric. It's simple, autonomous, and integrated into Fabric. Now, the marketing you're going to see around this, and if you watch some presentations from FabCon or from Ignite, is the marketing spiel is simple, autonomous, and optimized for AI. But I'll tell you, these days, every single thing that Microsoft produces is going to be optimized for AI. Like, everything we do has AI built in, like ready for AI. You're going to see that on absolutely everything. It's become table stakes for us. So you're going to see actually the AI functionality that we have in all of our different databases that we produce, that's all going to converge into the same solution. So every database platform we have, whether it's Cosmos DB or Postgres or Azure SQL or SQL and Fabric, all of them will have similar functionality, the ability to do vector searches, hybrid searches, vector embeddings, vector indexes, all of those things that you need to create an AI application. All of that's going to be built into all of our databases by default. So over time, that functionality should permeate into all the versions of all of our databases, including SQL Server on-prem. If you haven't seen the announcements for SQL Server 2025, even that is going to have all of this AI goodness built into it. So that's just table stakes for us. So for me, the thing that makes SQL Database and Fabric stand out from the other flavors of SQL is that it's integrated in Fabric, which gives you a whole bunch of additional things that you can do with your data without very much effort. And of course, all the goodness of SQL, it's secure by default. It's just the SQL engine that you're used to, the same Azure SQL database engine you're used to, but now fully integrated with OneLake, with that one-stop shop for your data. Okay, so let's take a little bit of peek under the hood. And 1 second, I just gotta fix my door that my dog very kindly opened for me. So like I said, it is just Azure SQL database. Right now, the database engine that's backing SQL and Fabric is Azure SQL database serverless general purpose. So if you want to know like what the performance characteristics would be, it would be similar to that database engine. It is serverless, which means if it's idle for 15 minutes or a little more than 15 minutes, it will spin down. So you will not be billed for it when it's spun down. But also when you come back in to hit it, there can be a little bit of a delay when it spins back up. But other than that, it should work very much the same as Azure SQL Database. And in fact, that's how Azure SQL Database serverless works. So the difference here is we've got this nice Fabric wrapper around it. So what we are doing to enable this is we have our fleet management software that can more easily manage fleets of databases. It does things like auto scaling and balancing of performance. So if your database is running hot and it needs more cores, it can allocate more cores and then deallocate cores as needed. So you don't have to actually manage the scaling yourself. And also, it makes it super fast to provision a database. All you have to do is give it a name, and then it's ready to go. We have a pre-provisioned pool of databases that are sitting there. And when you ask for a database, you give it a name. We just rename it and hand you a pre-created database. So that's why it's super fast. So the engine, like I said, the engine itself is Azure SQL Database. So you still have MDF and LDF files, just like you would in a regular database. But what we are doing to get the data into OneLake is we're mirroring it automatically for you. So this is near real-time replication. Your mileage may vary on how fast it's going to get there, but usually seconds to minutes for the data to get over into OneLake. And so there in OneLake, it's stored in Delta Parquet format, like all of the other databases that are, or data stores that are available in OneLake. So it's Delta Parquet like everything else. And you have actually two separate endpoints when you create a SQL database in Fabric. So you have the SQL endpoint that connects to the database itself. And then you also have a SQL Analytics endpoint that is connected to the copy in OneLake. So out of the box, you have a read-only copy that's available for reporting or anything else you want to use it for in Fabric. And then you can reserve the database itself for your transactional applications. So if you want to go ahead and take advantage of all the analytical capabilities in Fabric, you can do that without impacting your transactional workload. So this is how SQL database in Fabric works. Anyone have a question so far? Okay. So what I'll do is just kind of show you what this looks like. And as Martin pointed out earlier, this is my task flow. This is something you can do in Fabric. It's really just a way to kind of map out your application. So what you have workspaces in Fabric. So it's kind of like a folder that has all of your items in it. And these are all the items that are in my workspace. And when you start getting a lot of items, it can sometimes be challenging to find what you're looking for. And so the task flows are a nice way to organize your workspaces. And it's really great for demos because if I want to, focus on my database, I can just go click the database here, and then I can see everything related to my database. Now, here's one of my demo databases, and you notice that there are two other things that are like child items under this database. So this is the SQL database, but then underneath it, by default, we create a copy of the data in OneLake, an analytics endpoint, and a semantic model so that I can immediately create Power BI reports that will connect to the semantic model and to my read-only copy of the data. All of this gets created out of the box. All you have to do is give it a name and you're ready to go. This just all gets created for you. And then, so the SQL Analytics endpoint, like I said, that is one way to copy or to connect to the read-only database. But let me come back to the database itself, and I'll show you the interface. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to be using the Fabric interface for this demo, but if you want to, you can use Management Studio. Once you open your database, it's going to take a minute because I let it pause while I was talking earlier, so it's going to take a minute to spin back up. But notice in the toolbar here, you have this open in window. So you can hit this drop down. You can open in Visual Studio Code or you can open in Management Studio. So if you don't want to use the Fabric interface, you don't have to. You can keep using Management Studio. And as long as you have the newest version of Management Studio, it's actually aware of Fabric. So it knows when it's connecting to a SQL database in Fabric, and it can give you appropriate options based on the fact that that's the platform it's connecting to. Other than that, it works a lot like Management Studio. It's obviously not going to have the same amount of functionality as Management Studio, but you've got, an object browser, and you can browse to your tables. You can just click on them, and they'll open up in the window here. It's basically just doing like a select star from table, and you've got this grid interface that you can interface with, or you can just write queries like you normally would in Management Studio. It's got full Copilot support. So you can use Copilot to help you write queries. You can also do some fun things like explain queries. So I have this query open, and I can just click this explain query button, and it automatically comments my query. So it's saying, okay, it's selecting the top 10 products by product ID and name, along with the total quantity sold. It's telling me the join, why I'm doing the join, filtering the results with vest in their name. Okay, so I can do some kind of fun stuff using Copilot in here. And there's also a sidebar Copilot that you can ask questions about, SQL syntax in general or whatever. And then, I mean, obviously, if I run this query, it's just like any other query editor. You also have the ability to monitor the replication going to OneLake. So if you have lots of transactions coming in, it might, like I said, it might take a few seconds or a few minutes even to get that data over into OneLake. So this will give you a way to see how the replication over to OneLake is going. You can also manage security here. So you have security model just like you do in any other SQL engine. So you're able to secure tables or stored procedures or columns. You can even do row level security. You can do all of that in the engine itself, but you can also manage based on Fabric users. So these are roles that are in my database. And what I can do is when I grant someone like a Fabric user access to the SQL database, if I just give them access to the item, like I share the item with them, that gives them the ability to connect to the database, but it doesn't give them any special permissions inside the database. So I have to either put them in one of these roles, or I can apply security principles using T-SQL commands, just like I would in any other SQL database. So there's the Fabric Fabric security model that controls access to the item itself. And then we hand off into the SQL engine and have that deep granular security in the SQL engine. So it's a real seamless security experience for you. One thing to note, though, is no SQL authentication, because basic authentication is a no-no these days. We don't allow that anywhere in Microsoft anymore. So this supports Entra authentication only. Let's see. I heard Copilot is going to be available for F2 capacity in the future, as Copilot is currently available for F64 capacity. It actually is today. They turned that on May 1st, I think it was, that they turned on access in F2 capacities and higher. So you can access Copilot as long as you're in F2 or higher capacity. Okay, so now this is our SQL database endpoint. And then as I mentioned, we also have a SQL Analytics endpoint. So this is using the same query engine that we use for data warehouse. And this is connecting to the OneDrive. So this is OneLake. This is connecting to the Delta Parquet files directly. And so again, you can use T-SQL queries here, just like you would in the engine. But again, this is the analytics engine. So the syntax in some cases is not exactly the same, but it's pretty close. And this is read-only. So this is not going to hit your database. And again, if you come back to, I'm going to come back to my flows here, my task flows. You can pretty quickly and easily create Power BI reports. So I have a few Power BI reports created, and actually, Copilot is actually pretty good at creating Power BI reports. I'm terrible at Power BI. Like I'm useless creating Power BI reports. I did a demo at Power Hour at the last FabCon, and there were lots of jokes built into the demo, but how bad my PowerPoint reports were not, or my PowerPoint reports, how bad my Power BI reports were was not supposed to be a joke. But the minute my report came up, everybody laughed because it was a true Power BI audience. So anyway, I rely a lot on Copilot to build these reports. And so Copilot actually built this report for me based on the data I had. So this is like super easy to do. If I come to my demo database, to the analytics endpoint, and then I just say, go to reporting and say new report, it just brings up Power BI. And then, like I said, I can just type into Copilot, hey, create me a report that does this, and it'll go suggest something. So good stuff here. And there's a lot of other things. I don't have a huge amount of time to browse around here, but there's a lot of other things that you can do here. Creating the graph, I'll go back to my task flows here. So I've created a GraphQL endpoint, which allows me to publish an API for my app developers to connect to. I created a basic pipeline that brings in data from an external source. And I've got a T-SQL notebook that I can use. So for your data scientists that like to use notebooks, you can do that as well. And then I have these all connecting to the analytics endpoint so that they're not hitting my my live data. All of this is based on a tutorial that Buck Woody built when we first launched SQL in Fabric, and you can find that in our documentation, in our Learn documentation. I can get a link to it later. I don't have it handy, but actually it might be in my slide deck. Oh, not in this one because it's new. So yeah, so you can actually do all this yourself. You can just spin up a trial capacity in Fabric and create a database and then go through the tutorial. It's pretty straightforward. And you can get this stuff done in less than an hour. You can get this whole thing built. It's super fast and easy. Any other questions before I go back to the deck? Okay. All right. So that was the what. Let's move on to the where. All right. So you've got a lot of choices now when it comes to SQL Server. So this is Bob Ward really likes this phrase. SQL from ground to cloud is what he used to call it. And once we announced Fabric, now it's ground to cloud to Fabric. So it's the same SQL engine everywhere you run it, and you can run it anywhere you want to. So SQL Server on-prem, SQL Server 2025 was announced, will be coming out sometime this year. You can run SQL on containers in Linux. You can run SQL using Azure Arc to connect your on-prem SQL servers or your SQL servers in other clouds to Azure. You can run it in Azure and MI and SQL DB, or you can run it in Fabric. So that's great because it's the same engine running, it's the same code. And it's got the same support. They all support Management Studio, the same tools, Visual Studio Code. It's all the same engine and all of that. And it's all going to have copilots and integration into AI Foundry and even Fabric. You can mirror your databases. So if you already have existing databases on-prem or in Azure, you can mirror those into Fabric and then take advantage of Fabric without moving the data itself. So there's lots of choices here. So you might be asking, like, well, how do I know which one to use? So the rule of thumb is we would encourage you to use SQL database in Fabric for any new development. The great thing about SQL database in Fabric is that it's easy to use. It's great for developers. They don't have to think a lot about where things go in Azure. They don't have to worry about spinning up, new networks and doing firewall rules and all that kind of stuff. It's all super easy. You just give it a name and go. And it's all falls under the same Fabric capacity. So you don't have to worry about a new bill or anything like that. It just consumes from the existing Fabric capacity. So it's super easy. So that's where you would consider new development, or maybe if you have analytics needs. So if you have a database that's really just being used for Power BI reports, why not put it in Fabric? Then they can both consume the same capacity. They can be co-located. And it's a super easy way to get started doing that kind of thing. So that's Fabric. Now, obviously, if you need full control over everything you want to do, and you need to run it in another cloud or on-prem, then you're going to go the other end of the spectrum, which is SQL Server, hopefully SQL Server 2025, but some version of on-prem SQL. And then there's all these different flavors in between. So if you want to come to the cloud, but you don't want to change your application, you can lift and shift into either an Azure SQL virtual machine or into Azure SQL MI. Those are great options if you don't want to make any changes. And by enabling Azure Arc in your on-prem system, it's actually a quick way to get to MI because you can use the MI link functionality, which I think finally went to GA. Sorry. So you can use that as a quick and easy way to get from on-prem into the cloud if you're planning cloud migration. If you're building a cloud native app and you don't really want to invest fully in Fabric, then you can go with Azure SQL Database. We generally recommend Hyperscale as the platform of choice because that allows you to grow from small to very large databases. But we have lots of different service tiers depending on how much you want to spend and how much performance you want to get out of those databases. And so really it kind of depends on where you're at in your cloud journey and what you want to do with your data. But I think for new development, it's the same. SQL Database and Fabric is the same functionality as Azure SQL Database, and they're going to remain the same functionality because it is the same engine. So I think that's great for new apps, especially right now, small apps, or what I call analytics adjacent scenarios. So anything that, like I said, just writing Power BI reports or doing analytics. So that's the where for SQL. Now, if you're already invested in Fabric, you may be wondering, okay, I already have this Fabric investment. Where in Fabric do I want to put my data? Because you've now got several different choices for data storage in Fabric as well. So if you want to choose where in Fabric to put your data, you really want to be looking at what type of data is it and how do you want to access it? Those are the two things to consider when you're choosing data storage. So if you just want to do like Spark jobs and notebooks and do some machine learning on your data, especially if it's unstructured data, you can just put it into a lakehouse and just operate directly on the lake itself, on the Delta files. So that's what lakehouses are great for. Now, if you have real-time data, so let's say you have sensors coming in or logs that where you have lots of events coming in quick succession, and you want to do some analysis on the fly, that's what event houses are great for. So this is real-time intelligence, or RTI. So this is great for, like I said, processing logs, processing sensor input or whatever, especially if you want to take action based on a certain kind of event. So you have this event house. This uses Kusto, KQL, to process events, and then you can have what's called an activator, so that based on whatever information comes across in the event, you can fire off an action. So that's where so real-time intelligence or event houses is where you would store that kind of data. And then, of course, we have data warehouses. So this would be for generally structured. I mean, you could have semi-structured data in here as well. You can have like JSON documents in here. However, this is traditionally if you want to access with T-SQL, so it's generally structured data. So the main difference between a lakehouse and a warehouse is if the lakehouse is good for unstructured data or semi-structured data, whereas the warehouse is better for structured data. And so structured data, it does access with T-SQL. This is your SQL analytics endpoint. But the difference between a warehouse and a database is, yes, the database also stores structured data, but this is better for OLTP access. And the difference here is the data storage and the query engine. So the warehouse is designed for massively parallel processing, MPP, and it also is using column store format. And the warehouse in Fabric is actually storing everything directly in the Delta files. So this is better for columnar access, which means it's better for analytical style or OLAP style queries. Those kinds of queries, you can run them in a database, but the database is much stronger in the OLTP. And what you'll find is those single row OLTP style queries, they can be a little bit slower in the warehouse. So if you have structured data that you want to use in a transactional fashion, that's great for the database. Also uses T-SQL. And as I said earlier, it is mirroring into OneLake. So if you want to do analysis on it as well, you can still do that. But if you need that transactional access, that's where the database really shines. So summarize, Lakehouse for unstructured and semi-structured data when you just want to access it with like Spark jobs or notebooks. Event House is for your real-time data, event processing, like IoT sensor type input, where you process it real-time using KQL. Warehouse for structured but analytical data, and then database for structured but transactional data. Okay, so these are your options within Fabric. And that's the where. Okay, so now the why. I don't know. I had to play with the order here and see if it makes sense. Maybe I should put the why before the where. I'm not sure. But the why is, okay, why would you choose SQL and Fabric versus all these other places where you can run SQL? And here, the why is the three big pillars: simple, autonomous and secure, optimized for AI, but then there's the one that I really like, which is integrated with Fabric. So these are the reasons why you might choose SQL and Fabric specifically over Azure SQL as an example. Okay, so it is still built upon that same familiar SQL engine. It is just Azure SQL database under the covers, but with all the goodness of Fabric on top of it. So simple, really easy provisioning and querying. takes seconds to provision a database. You literally only give it a database name. That is it. And you're ready to go. You've got a nice lightweight query editor directly in the portal if you want to use it. So for folks who don't have a lot of familiarity with SQL or especially with Azure, it's a real easy way to get started. Context-aware Copilot assistance, so it knows about your data. And if you have really descriptive column names and table names, it's going to be really good at suggesting queries for you. So it's totally aware of where you are and what you're doing. Full client tools support. So if you do want to continue using the tools that you're used to, especially for developers using Visual Studio Code, you will have that support. And then the T-SQL engine that you're familiar with. So if you do already have that SQL knowledge, it's going to continue to work. But the thing here is how easy it is to provision it and to manage it, okay? Yep, thanks, Stefan. Okay, so autonomous and secure. So here's really autonomous also kind of carries over the simplicity as well. Things that you don't need to do. So even when you have a database in the cloud with Azure SQL Database, even though it's like Microsoft managed or cloud managed, there are still some things that you need to do. You need to decide whether you want HADR. You need to decide what kind of tiering you need. If you need to scale up your database, you have to do that on your own. Like you need to add vCores if you need more vCores. This is when you're in Fabric, we do all of this for you. Automatic HA with zone redundancy. You don't have to choose any options, turn any knobs, make any choices. It's all there automatically. Automatic scaling of compute and storage. So we will auto scale cores up and down as needed. We're automatically replicating to OneLake, so you don't have to do any ETL. You don't have to set up any availability groups to get a read-only copy of your database. We do all of that for you. Automatic indexing is turned on. I mean, for seasoned DBAs, it makes us twitch a little bit because the automatic indexing, we feel like, oh, we'd rather do it ourselves. But for folks who don't know what an index is or who just have no idea how to create or manage indexes, that's a great feature. All the latest intelligent query processing. So everything that we have in the Azure SQL engine is, of course, here, and that's getting better and better over time. Automatic backups, point-in-time restore, all of this done with just a few clicks in the portal. So the backups are being taken automatically. If you need to do a point-in-time restore, you literally just go into that Fabric portal, you go to your restore points, you choose the one you want to store, click a button, and you're done. Automatic patching, of course. And then there's a nice simplified performance dashboard. Now, again, for those of you who are seasoned DBAs, it might not have all the information that you're used to seeing. So that's why you can still go into Management Studio and open the query store yourself and look at all that on your own. But for folks who are just new to SQL or new to databases, it's really a simple way to kind of see what's going on in your database and what queries are chewing up a lot of resources. Okay. And of course, secure and governed by default. So as I said, Entra authentication only. It's a little bit of a pain for folks who are using SQL authentication today, but it's much, much more secure. No more passwords to manage in your database, no more essays with blank passwords. So we won't let you do any of that. Data encryption, data encrypted at rest, customer managed key support is going to come in time for GA. Workspace management, so there's easy management. If you haven't played with the Fabric security model, there's some nice easy ways to do central management. But like I said, if you need that more granular security, you have that available to you as well by using the security controls that are built into the engine itself. So you can do it as easy or as hard as you like. Auditing, that's also going to come by GA by the end of this year. Networking security, so private link support, and then central governance through Purview. So everything you need to create a secure database solution, it's there for you, and it's way, way easier than it is in Azure because the Fabric interface just makes it so easy and everything is seamlessly integrated. And then, of course, optimized for AI, all the good AI stuff that's in all of our databases now, RAG patterns, semantic search, Fabric integrations, all of this, and then integration with AI Foundry. It's super easy to do. I knew absolutely nothing about AI. The first time I learned anything about RAG was at Build last year, and just following this Fabric tutorial, I was able to create a RAG app in like 30 minutes. Like it's they've made it so easy. So don't be afraid of AI. If you want to go and try this stuff, you can do this today using SQL database. It is super easy. And last but not least, like I said, for me, the real benefit of having SQL in Fabric is how easy it is to integrate with everything else in Fabric. That near real-time replication into OneLake. Now you've got access to your data through a semantic model. I didn't even know what a semantic model was when I started, playing with Fabric. So it all gets created for you. And if you know semantic models, if you're really good at it, no problem. You can go build your own semantic models. You can edit the one that's created for you, or you can go and create your own. And then everything else in Fabric, like people keep asking for cross database queries, right? That's always a big thing because that's one of the things that, Azure SQL didn't support out of the box, right? If you want a cross database query in SQL and Fabric, again, we don't directly support it, but Fabric has shortcuts. So shortcuts allow you, it's just like creating a shortcut on your desktop to an application. It's the same kind of thing. You can create a shortcut to another data source. So you can pull together many data sources. So if you want to create a query that queries across your SQL database and some stuff you have in a lakehouse and some stuff you have in a warehouse, you can use shortcuts to bring all that together into a single query. It's all super easy. And then the GraphQL endpoint does the same thing. GraphQL endpoint can connect to all these sources as well. So you can publish an API that pulls data together from several different sources in Fabric. And it's super easy to do. It's all, like I said, a few clicks and you've got this stuff created and it's running, and it's so easy to do. No more ETL, no more like creating really complicated jobs and moving data all over the place. Fabric makes it super easy, all integrated together. And I know sometimes I feel like I sound like my marketing folks, like, oh, it's so pretty, it's so beautiful. But believe it or not, it really does work. And I've had a lot of customers, like my customers actually sold me on it, because I was like, why are we doing this? It doesn't seem like there's a need there. But believe it or not, there is. I mean, this ability to do more with your data without writing a whole lot of complicated code, it's really catching on, and it's really making people be able to do things faster and easier. So it's not just hype. Now there is a lot of stuff in Fabric that's still rough edges. So there are a few things that don't work together yet, but they're all getting there. So I don't want to say it's all sunshine and roses. There's definitely some rough edges that you're going to run into, but for the most part, it works great, especially for the basic things. Sorry, got a little tickle. Okay. So who's going to use this thing? Well, like I said, because of the simplicity, it's really great for developers. But the first people who started using SQL database and Fabric were really people who were already in Fabric, who were doing analytical use cases, but who had a need for some transactional data. Like, for example, maybe they had some like lookup data or like metadata or something, like dimension tables or something that they thought would be better stored in a transactional database because it's small and the access patterns were more like transactional queries. Then they would start using SQL database. So they might have already been in Fabric. So you have business users creating Power BI reports, and you have analytics professionals using notebooks on this data. And now, instead of having to ETL the data from your transactional system outside of Fabric, you could just move that system into Fabric directly, use GraphQL API to talk to it from an end user application, and then continue to have your business users and your analytics professionals use the same tools that they're already used to. So using Power BI and notebooks against one lake, but moving your transactional data directly in here. So this would be just a basic analytics application using SQL database and Fabric. And so thinking about like net new applications, if you have a simple application like this, that's just a basic front end over a database, and then you want to do reporting on it, super easy to just do that directly into Fabric rather than having Azure SQL. Okay, and then this is another super common pattern we've been seeing. So again, folks are already in Fabric. They're already doing, you may have like a medallion architecture that's really complicated where you're, you have a lot of pipelines that are moving data from bronze to silver to gold. And sometimes those pipelines can be quite complex. And there are folks who wanted to do metadata-driven pipelines, which require you to store some information about the data transformations in a data store. SQL database is great for that. So we've got a lot of folks using SQL database, even in production today, to do metadata-driven pipelines. So in this case, you could actually create an application that would allow a user to manipulate your pipelines simply by changing values in the SQL database without having access to the pipeline itself. So you can control all this if you wanted to, or you can just, as you build your pipelines, you can just store this in the database, however you want to control this. So again, this would be your business users using Power BI, your analytics professionals using notebooks, but now you're using the SQL database to help drive your pipelines. So that's another really common, use pattern that we're seeing. And there's a question. Getting the slides? Yep, I'd be happy to share the slides with you after. I'll share them with Warwick and Warwick can distribute them. Okay, I probably just have to clean up the notes because I grabbed these slides from a bunch of different texts. Okay. So here's that RAG pattern I was talking about. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So this is where, so if you go out to ChatGPT and you ask ChatGPT a question, right? That's a large language model, LLM, that's been trained on like the entire internet, like the whole body of human communication is trained that model, but it doesn't have context on your data specifically. So if you ask it a business question, it's going to give you a general answer, but it's a general answer based on like everything it knows, which is a lot. And it's not grounded in your specific data. So what RAG is okay, it's augmenting the prompt that you send to the LLM with data that's yours, that is like, for example, your own product data. So you have a product catalog that has certain items in it that are different colors and sizes and shapes or whatever. So if a user comes in and asks a question, hey, I want to find, I don't know, a red t-shirt that's embellished with sequins or something like that. You could ask an LLM for that, and it would give you all these like red sequin t-shirts available all over the place, but not necessarily your products. So what you could do is you could augment that prompt. Okay, I want a red sequin t-shirt. And then you say, okay, here are all the products in my database that are close to red sequin t-shirt. So I do a vector search across my product descriptions, looking for anything that's close to a red sequin t-shirt. And then I send that list of products out to the LLM. I augment the prompt with, here are some products that are available. And then it brings me in an answer that includes not only the breadth of knowledge of the LLM, but also my data too, but in a secure way, right? Because within Fabric, everything is secured in my environment. And I can talk to Azure OpenAI, my own, using Azure Network. I don't have to leave Azure and go to the internet. I can do all of this. I could even connect to my own model. So maybe you have a model that you're running locally that you don't want to use one of these public models. You can do that as well to do this RAG pattern. So this is something, again, it's super easy to set up in Fabric because we make all of these connections easy for you. So I set up a RAG app, like I said, in like 30 minutes. And again, this is another tutorial that's out there I think Buck actually has some of this AI functionality built into his tutorial that he put on the website. This is super easy. If you haven't tried this yet, I really recommend you go out and try to build one of these, because it's just way easier than you think. I know a lot of folks, I know I was super intimidated by all this AI stuff when I first started learning about it. It's way easier than you think. So this is super cool, and you can do this lickety split. And you can, and look at, I mean, you can see the pattern. It looks basically the same as the analytics app because it's all the same pieces. The only difference here is I'm calling out to OpenAI or AI Foundry from the database itself, right? To do the vector searching and the embeddings and things like that. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So now I'm going to do the fancy one. And this is kind of forward looking because not all of these things talk to each other yet. Some of them are in development. Some of them are in preview. So this is kind of a future looking thing, but you could actually stand up a POC that does something very close to this today if you wanted to. So let me turn on my little pointer thing. Okay. All right. So here I'm imagining, remember I said the power of SQL database in Fabric is that it's integrated with everything else. And there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with Fabric. So here what I'm going to imagine is an agentic application with real-time insights. So we're going to combine databases with RTI, remember that event house thing, real-time processing, with OpenAI, AI Foundry, along with some of the extra things we have in Fabric, like functions, to build a full agentic app, mainly with just Fabric. So let's imagine here that we have this customer that's got an app on their phone and they're browsing for hardware from the Contoso hardware company. And so this customer is looking for a DeWalt saw, okay? So what's happening in the Contoso hardware location in the warehouse is the last saw has been sold. So there's a sensor on the store shelf that sends out an alert, oh, inventory is 0. So that comes into our real-time intelligence, RTI, and we're processing the events on the fly. And we have some kind of an activator that when inventory gets to 0, I trigger this workflow, this agentic workflow. So OpenAI can see that this customer came in and asked for the DeWalt saw, but that saw is out of stock, which was updated based on this activator that updated the catalog DB to say that, or the, whatever, I guess, catalog or transactions, wherever the inventory is sold. And we know that it's 0 now. And the AI is like, okay, the saw they wanted is out of stock. So let's see, are there any alternatives we can offer that would be similar to this DeWalt saw? And since we don't have the one that they want, should we maybe give them a discount on this saw so that they're more likely to come out of this transaction satisfied? And so these might be some AI skills, or we now have something called data agent. It used to be called AI skills. Now it's called data agent. So we have things that can actually do these calculations. So in this case, we're going to imagine that they're functions. And what these functions are going to do is there's one function that can get relevant products. So based on this DeWalt saw, what other products do I have? And then I've run this discount model skill from a notebook in my OneLake, and I figured out, okay, I need to create this dynamic offer because of this situation that just happened. So AI can go and call this function and create a dynamic offer, write that into the offers database. So now when my web page goes back, or the application goes back and returns to the customer recommendations, it can say, hey, that thing that you wanted is out of stock, but how about this Milwaukee saw? And oh, by the way, I'm going to give you a discount on it so that it's more comparable to that DeWalt saw that you wanted. And all of this can happen without any intervention of a human being. This would all be the sensors and the real-time intelligence and the discount skills and all of these AI agents that would do all of this, so that by the time we respond back to the customer, all of this is already in place in the database. So this is something you could actually do today. The only thing that's a little bit not there yet, like right now, real-time intelligence can't talk to the database itself, so everything kind of has to go through OneLake right now. But everything talks to one lake because that's kind of how Fabric is. So you could play with this today. All of this exists. The real-time intelligence, the functions, most of this is in preview right now, but it's all coming to GA in the very near future. So this is kind of our vision for what you can do with Fabric, sort of now, but sort of, in the near future. All right, I'm going to turn off my little laser pointer there. Any questions?
Nothing at this stage, Pam.
What's that?
I was just saying nothing at this stage.
Okay. Okay. So the when. Well, the when is now. Try it today. Like I said, a lot of that is still in preview. SQL database in Fabric is in preview in most regions where Fabric is available. I think now the only region that SQL database is not available in is UK West. Everything else has lit up over the past couple of months. So it's in preview today. We do plan to go to GA by the end of calendar year 2025. However, I will say that the service itself is ready. We do have some customers that are in production on SQL database and Fabric. The only thing that's missing are a few of those enterprise readiness features that we really feel that enterprises are going to need. Customer managed key is one of them, auditing, and then GODR. These are some of the features that we really feel like need to have a little more work before we declare general availability of the service. So the service itself is ready to go if you don't need those additional features, but we really want to make sure we have that enterprise level security before we go to GA. So that's what's holding up GA. But try it today. If you have a Fabric capacity, you can spin up a database and play with it. All of these other things that I talked about, real-time intelligence, Fabric functions, data agents, you can all play with that. Functions and data agents are still in preview. GraphQL, I think, is generally available now. I think that just went to GA. So some of this is in preview now, but most of it is going to go to GA by the end of the year. In some shape or form. So lots of really cool stuff, especially the RTI, the real-time intelligence is really cool technology. You can do some really fun stuff with that. I've seen some great demos, especially if you get to go to a conference anytime this year. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff with RTI. So I would say take a look at it, play with it, spin up a trial capacity in Fabric. It's free. All you need is a tenant. And try it out and play with this, and you can see how easy it is to get started. Okay, that is my last slide other than Q&A.
Okay, so we've got one from Dan. So is replication of SQL database in Fabric into the Lakehouse data format customizable? For instance, if only want just some transactional data into Fabric.
The replication of SQL into Lake.
Dan, do you want to?
So you can't.
Maybe elaborate.
So, right now you can't. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so if I'm reading this right, and we have a transactional application, and we decide to put that into SQL database in Fabric, and let's say it's quite a large application, hundreds of gigs or whatever. Effectively, the replication that you're talking about into that Lakehouse data format for the analytics, let's say you don't want all of that data available for analytics, because being replicated, it's like another copy of the data in one sense, although it's Parquet format. So I guess the question is, can you say, well, but as well, if we were doing medallion architecture and we had a transactional system, you would only bring into that, into the bronze layers out of that transactional system, just the data that you needed to be there for that analytics. So I guess the question then is, can you customize exactly which of that transactional data comes into that Lakehouse data format to say, oh, I only want these tables or not those tables?
Not yet, but that is something that they are working on. The ability to either turn off the replication altogether or select certain tables that you don't want to replicate. So that is something that that is in the roadmap, but is not there yet.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah.
the other thing I'd add to that,
Mm,
Dan, is
mm.
given that you're talking about, you've got your medallion architecture and you've got data coming from somewhere, and as you mentioned, you want to put it into the bronze layer, right? It, depending on what you're doing, yes, you may land it in a Fabric SQL database. You may land it into into the data lake itself, right? So you've got a couple of options on where you want that data to land into.
Yep. And yeah, you're right. I guess I would have thought you'd probably want to land it straight into that lake house, because if you're building like through the medallion architecture, an enterprise, a data warehouse of sorts, and you want that there for the analytics and all that sort of stuff, then probably going straight into that lake house data format is probably the way to go. Yeah, I know you've got options though, but just trying to think if that would be the better pattern. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of customers kind of asking for something similar. So that's definitely in the roadmap for considerations. But yeah, you've got a lot of different options here,
Right.
which is both good and bad, I guess.
Yeah. So is the migration from like say an on-prem or a SQL Azure database into the SQL database in Fabric, is that fairly easy to do to get it into that? It seems like it's just another version of SQL Server, just in a different location, effectively.
Yeah, it's just Azure SQL database. That's all it is. But because it's Azure SQL database, you're kind of limited as to what you can use. It's basically DAC pack backpack type situation, some kind of import export. Now, right now, we never intended this originally to be a migration target. It was really meant for new app development and analytics apps out of the box. So it wasn't, so migration isn't a primary scenario for this. However, there are tons of customers asking for migration, especially because we do have a lot of customers that are using SQL Server on-prem as a data warehouse. And they want to just lift and shift that into Fabric. So there is some work being done around migration tooling and seeing if there's some way we can build a migration story for this, but it's a lower priority. Right now, we need to get GA out the door, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, but there's definitely some work happening around migrations. What I've been telling customers in the meantime, oh, hang on one second. Good night, buddy. Love you. Mwah. So what I've been telling customers is run the existing migration tooling with Azure SQL Database as your target. And that will evaluate your data to just see whether there's anything that's incompatible with the platform. You won't be able to you might, and actually might even just work using that tooling to do the migration, but it's not fully supported yet. So, but use that so that you know whether you need to make any changes, and then you can do your own like SQL package import.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Pam. Appreciate that.
Greg, with your question, do you want to elaborate a little bit more just around that mirroring? Are you talking about mirroring from Azure SQL Database to Fabric, or the data transfer / replication from Fabric SQL Database to OneLake?
Also, hi, Greg.
If you want to come off of mute, Greg, you can.
Yeah.
Might be in a place where he can't.
Yeah. Oh, he's typing. I'll wait.
Yes.
On my
okay.
iPad. Okay. So what's really needed with mirroring is a built-in way to know which data, if any, has changed. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I need more context. If you have more context on because like basically what we're doing for both mirroring from Azure SQL database and the replication from SQL database and Fabric into OneLake is using the change event. What is it called? Change event capture or whatever. I can't remember. It's not exactly CDC. It's like CDC, but it's like the modified version that was built for Azure SQL. So it's a little bit better than CDC, but it's kind of the same thing. And so there
Hey
is
Pam, it's Greg. Can you
Oh, hey.
hear
Yeah, I
me?
can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if it'd work on the iPad.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you great.
So how are you? Hope you're well. Yeah.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, I think all I was sort of getting at is that with any of the mirroring or the replication options, things like that, invariably what we want to do is some sort of incremental load.
Right.
And unfortunately, none of them at the moment do a good job of letting you know what's changed.
The mirroring implementation itself, you mean?
Well, yeah, if you use mirroring, I'm not a big fan of the mirroring at the moment because basically if you use mirroring from pretty much anywhere, it basically just copies the data in so you have another copy of the data. The thinking seems to be that you'll just use Direct Lake or something to build reports over the top of it. But I mean, that's just a horrible way to do things.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so what you need to do is you need to do some sort of cleansing and processing and, just if you're going to use a medallion architecture or a data warehouse, anything. But the problem is the data volumes grow. You don't want to do the whole thing, on and off like all the time. You need to know what's actually changed.
So you need change tracking in OneLake is what you're saying.
It doesn't even have to be change tracking directly. What I was thinking would work really well is if they had some automatically generated columns that said things like, what was the date and time when it was changed at the source? What was the date and time when it was changed when it arrived? Things like that you could then at least index or something or get access to if it's Parquet or whatever. But I mean, something to give you a clue. A, has anything changed? And B, what's changed?
Yeah,
anyway,
that's good.
It's just a thought.
Yeah, I'll look and see. I'll look and see because that might be feedback. I do think that that's feedback I've heard in the past. So I'll look and see if that's a feedback item.
Yeah, I've put it into numerous forums. As I said, I think there is a need for sort of auto-generated columns, and then I think it'd be really useful. So
yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Greg.
Okay. Any other questions for Pam? Feel free to either put your hand up, come off of mute, you can ask it, or you can put it in the chat window. So
actually, one other thing I will throw in, Warwick, is just the discussion earlier about cross-database queries and the fact you can use shortcuts and things like that. Just if you are using Azure SQL database, what we use all the time are external tables. And I find that actually is a much better way to do things than using cross-database queries anyway, because it plays nicely with schema management, it plays nicely with IntelliSense, and so on and so on.
Yep.
Yeah, we found in the past using Polybase external tables is more efficient, more performant. So
then doing like a linked server query.
I kind of like the fact that you neatly declare basically a schema for that external thing, and then that way you know what's going on. I mean, you have to be careful about the type of queries and stuff. Again, how joins are going to be implemented, where the filtering happens, all that sort of stuff. But I mean, that's all sort of manageable. Actually, it's the biggest, the funny thing is I've seen a lot of discussion the last few days around linked servers, and it's the number one thing I see people get wrong with linked servers all the time is they never configure collation compatibility. And yet that's the biggest performance impact of the lot, and
makes sense.
it's just amazing, the difference that can make. And yet people never seem to ever look at configuring it. But it's a similar issue you've got to deal with external tables in terms of thinking about how to run queries like that. But anyway, I mean, there is this perception that you can't do these things with Azure SQL Database. I mean, you definitely can. So.
Yeah, you can. It's just a different mechanism. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions for Pam, a big thank you, Pam, for giving up your evening and coming along and presenting to us on the 5 Ws of SQL Database in Fabric. As we mentioned at the start, the session has been recorded. I will upload this, but it won't be uploaded until June. Okay, so we're going to make sure that the content isn't out there before Pam delivers this at her upcoming Saturday event. Then you will be able to have a look at or come back and have a look at today's session. Now, following on from one of the questions that we had this afternoon, we have actually I've just posted, we've got next month's session posted and available, and our very own Martin Catherall will be doing that session, co-hosting with another MVP here based down in Adelaide, Heidi Hastings. So it follows on with questions and the theme that we've got this month. So look for that invite or notification to hit your inboxes, sign up and come along for next week. If those of you who are into travel and you are going to BITS, then make sure you come and say hello, because there will be a couple of us there that, it'll be a good event, good for learning. So big thank you to Martin, big thank you to you all for coming along. And Pam will share her slide deck. If you are wanting that copy of that slide deck, reach out to me and I'll make that available. So with that, give some time back to everybody and get on with the rest of your day. But thank you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you all again in June for our next episode.
Thanks, all.
Cheers, Warwick. Cheers, Pam. Thanks everyone, guys, for joining.
Have a good one.
Catch ya.
Bye.
Bye.